Hello, and welcome to CACHE, the Portable Professional Development podcast from CACHE. Thanks for joining us. My name's Dawn, and I'm the editor of CACHE Alumni. And in this episode, we're talking skills and CPD with Thalia. Thalia, can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Thalia Galloway. I'm the eLearning Development Lead at eLearning for You.
Fabulous. And what do eLearning for You do?
We produce online training through a customizable learning management system.
Brilliant, thanks. And do you find that you get a lot of buy-in within CARE in terms of further training? Because in my experience,
a lot of people aren't really there for themselves. They're there to support other people. And because they see personal development as a personal thing, it goes to the bottom of their list.
Absolutely, most definitely. I think that you've got a lot of people who are looking to support those around them. They're not prioritizing themselves, and they are there for the people that they support, which is absolutely fantastic. And quite often we come across learners who have been encouraged to go into that sort of role because of their own personal experience with supporting a loved one, and they don't realize that the learning that can go alongside it can help them professionalize majorly. It's obviously all to be for the benefit of the people they're supporting. It shouldn't just be the self gratification of receiving a certificate, although that is also very important, and I wouldn't take away from that. But I think it's important that they realise that you are developing your own knowledge to benefit the individual in front of you. So if we think about maybe taking a dementia course, it might be that the individual you're supporting has a not very advanced level of dementia at the moment, so they're quite early on with their dementia journey, and you're thinking, okay, I wonder what I could do to support. But by taking a course now and thinking about all of the potential things that could come up and the different scenarios that you could face, actually you're better planned and prepared to support that individual as their dementia journey develops and potentially gets more complicated.
Yeah, that again makes total sense and sounds like a great reason to do stuff like that. You were talking specifically about dementia there, and I know that that's something that for a lot of people is quite a scary thing to cover. Do you think that doing something like a course in dementia and understanding that a little bit more can make it less scary in terms of figuring out how someone can live well with that condition? Absolutely,
I do. I think that it can be really scary to come across an individual with their experience of dementia and how they might be presenting, and you might be quite upset and distressed by it yourself. But by understanding the bits that go behind it, you can then start to maybe picture and understand why they're presenting in this way and how you can best support them to live well, and not stopping them from living as they are. It could be something that's, I don't know, maybe an agitation that we're not able to pick up on, or even something as serious as social disinhibition in the middle of the care home living room. And you would like to know some steps to help dealing with that, and how you can support them to live well, but without causing too much distress to themselves if they had their capacity, or to others.
That sounds great, and to be honest, that sounds like something that a lot of people might benefit from, not just people who work in health and social care.
I think so. I think there are more and more organisations out there who are paying attention to how, I think particularly with capacity and awareness around disability, or awareness around dementia, and thinking about how we can best support those people in our community. So a lot of shops now, for example, are thinking about how can we train our staff so that they know how to interact with this person. This person is struggling, let's say, to identify the correct money to pass over in the shop, and they're getting quite agitated by that. How can I support them with that? Or this person's walked into the library and they're completely disorientated. Can I help them maybe find their way, and having the confidence to think about how to deal with those sorts of things.
Yeah, I recently did some Dementia Friends training with the Alzheimer's Society, and actually there was a lot of stuff that came up in that I had no awareness of, though I've worked in roles where I've looked after people in the past. So it was really helpful to consider things from the point of view of the person who has dementia, and think about those sort of differences in how they might react to different situations based on that difference in cognition. But you mentioned the idea around capacity, and I know that that's something where there's quite a lot of confusion about capacity, both from general members of the public, but also from people working in caring roles. Some of the practice that I've seen when I've worked in homelessness, for example, was contrary to the ideas that are presented in things like the deprivation of liberty safeguards. One of the key things that people maybe get wrong is the idea that if someone lacks capacity in one situation, it might actually be that they've got capacity in a different sort of scenario.
And we know that the area of the mental capacity is huge, which is why we've had a massive amendment bill go through Parliament this year, and we're still waiting for documentation on how what guidance is going to come out for us to support implementing the liberty protection safeguards, the revised name for the deprivation of liberty safeguards, because of these concerns around people being deprived of their liberty, not having their liberty safeguarded. Notice how they flipped it into the positive there. It's a big thing, and I think that there are definitely people, many people, both in health and social care as well as out, who don't know how to implement walking in and thinking, I must start with the concept that this person has capacity every time, even though for the last 50 days I've asked them if they want tea or coffee. They've not been able to answer my question. I need to open with the fact that they are going to be able to answer that question, and when they're struggling, I'm going to support them with those choices, and not just making the decision for them.
Yeah, and do you think that sort of continually updating knowledge is important with things like that, because of how quickly legislation and sort of just the amount of knowledge that we have about those things changes?
Absolutely. I mean, so the Mental Capacity Act originally came out 2005, and since then it's changed, it's morphed, it's become bigger things. We've had some landmark rulings, and as I say, we've now got this amendment bill that's come through this year. It changes so much, and we're still unable to implement it to the best of our ability. And that's the thing, is we're continually learning with capacity how much we can do to support those individuals. So for me, it's one of those topics that it doesn't matter how many times you've done it, there's always a new perspective, there's always a new sort of case study you could look at, or a new way of arguing that is a deprivation of liberty, and how can we protect that better? What other things can we do to support this individual in order to have the best outcomes for them and help them live well? And for that topic, I think there has to be continual learning. It's never a case of I know the things. Whereas I suppose if you were learning something about medication, it might be that you're learning about a particular medication because it's a drug that's maybe issued for pain relief. So it might be we're talking about paracetamol, and you might think, I know loads and loads about paracetamol, I understand the contraindications with it, I understand how it works, I know the overdose amount, and so on and so on. But actually with mental capacity, it changes so much. Paracetamol is paracetamol, it's only ever going to be paracetamol, whereas capacity is fluctuating, and the law around it is constantly evolving and adapting to be able to promote well-being the best.
That's great. Obviously capacity is one of those areas that we think everyone should be up to date with, and you mentioned medication as well. Is there anything else that you think is sort of a must in terms of CPD if you're working in a care setting?
There's also many musts. With the capacity, it all comes down to safeguarding, and when with medication even, it's about the safeguarding of those individuals to make sure that I'm not over-medicating in a dangerous way, that we're making sure that any contraindications are picked up so that they're safeguarded. So I think it all interlinks, but we've got many of these different titles. So we've got a title like dignity and respect. How can I try and promote that the best? If we're looking at information governance or data protection or whatever title we want to try and give it, and looking at how the GDPR is implemented, or the Data Protection Act, as it's now been legislated in the UK, is implemented here and relates to care records and making sure they're kept safe. And I think that we'll see it continue with anything that's been legislated, like safeguarding, like data protection. There are going to be amends in those laws as we identify more things. So we know we've got loads of landmark rulings about data breaches and how we need to ensure that those are protected against, and the reporting procedures. And every time, companies should be scrutinising their privacy policy and making sure that their staff are aware of the privacy policy. And I think that's the same with safeguarding. As I say, it might be a case of identifying that actually this is a concern with safeguarding at the moment, and this is an area we need to focus on. So many topics, so many things that go into supporting somebody to live well.
Yeah, and I think people sort of forget that when they talk about care. I think people think that care work is mostly about keeping people company and making sure that they're clean. I don't necessarily think that everybody listening to this podcast will understand the sort of depth of knowledge that's required in a care role, especially because it is possible to enter a care role without any qualification. I mean, is that something that you see in what you do in terms of capability, or people being able to do that job at a level really where it should be more sort of legislated for, that people need to have a certain level of qualification?
It's a very interesting discussion to have. I think the importance is around values-based recruitment and ensuring that you're recruiting the right type of person into the role in health and social care. And from there, you can then support them with their learning journey. We've obviously seen the implementation of the care certificate in England. Wales are about to enforce the All Wales induction framework, which is much more comprehensive, in-depth, and a longer qualification than the care certificate. And I think that goes a much deeper strides than what our minimum expectation is here in England. Equally, in Wales and in Scotland, there is a need for those practitioners to be on a register, unlike here in England. And I think that it's about making sure that we're safeguarding ourselves. It could be a case that you've got great organisations out there who are working with the likes of CACHE in order to ensure that their team members have not only gone through their care certificates, but now they're going through their apprenticeships and they're getting that level of training so that they're robust and that their staff know things. But at the same time, you've got a balance of people out who might be working as an independent carer, who've gone to support somebody and they're receiving payment for it, but actually they don't have that network of support to ensure that they are trained and that they're working at the right level. And that's possibly where I would like to see more registration, maybe, and maybe more stringent training expectations around the industry. I think loads of organisations are out there and they're doing a really good job. But equally, I think that there is a concern that you could be an individual living at home thinking, I might just put an ad in the local Gazette and see if there's somebody available who might be able to come and support me a bit. And it starts off with sort of a bit of company, and then it develops, and actually that person hasn't received the training that they need to be able to do that. And at the same time, I have to mention unpaid carers, because we've got loads and loads of people out there who are unpaid, who are family members looking after loved ones, and they don't necessarily know how to seek support, or they don't have the time or the capability, because it's all being poured into their loved one and possibly trying to maintain their career alongside, to then go and get additional training in how they should best be moving their loved family member from place A to place B. They're just trying their very best to do it well and not hurt themselves or hurt the individual. And I'd say that's an interesting point where we could look at maybe setting up better support networks for those people to be able to get their CPD and their training. And I know that there are some places out there that are doing that really well. There are some of the young carers trusts. Some of the local groups are working with local hospitals, for example, to get them the moving and handling training they might require, as well as things like basic first aid. and even cooking skills and things like that to help them on their way.
Some of that stuff sounds great.
Absolutely. I think all of the formalising of qualifications it helps professionalise what we're doing, and it helps professionalise the industry that we're in, and shows to people actually this is a professional industry. We're working really hard to get the best outcomes we can, and that's potentially where I would like to see a bit of a change.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you there. The unpaid carer thing is something that's really close to my heart. From my own experience, supporting my mum as an unpaid carer, there are conversations that we have around my grandma's care, where you've got that sort of additional barrier almost with unpaid carers, where they've got an additional thing to overcome, which is that pre-existing relationship. So for example, in my mum's case, sometimes it can be quite uncomfortable for my mum to talk about things with my grandma that might be easier if she wasn't a daughter and there wasn't that existing relationship where she was trying to explain why it's a bad idea to do some things. So the idea of specific training for unpaid carers in navigating those barriers, as well as where to find that help that you might find much easier if you were in a residential care setting, I can totally see why those would be really, really beneficial. You also mentioned sort of people going into care and then them not necessarily thinking about progression for themselves or understanding the benefits of it for the people that we're supporting. What I've found when I've been talking to people, again about them being bottom of their own list, is it can be quite difficult for people to talk about the things that they want to do in terms of their progression with employers. Have you got any tips for people who have maybe identified an interest or something that they want to do as a piece of development work, when they're talking to their employers about sort of progression or development of their skills?
I think the key for these people like that to remember is that your company definitely want to get the best and to get more from you, and those companies should be aware that it is much easier to have a staff member who already knows your organisation, who's ready to develop, rather than to recruit from outside, which has an associated cost. So if you've got a good idea of what you are thinking about and what's interesting you, and you're upfront and honest with them, and you say perhaps, oh, actually I really enjoyed the training we had recently on infection prevention control, and then I happened to go to the hospital on a visit with so-and-so, and I was just thinking about how we could implement some of those things here in our workplace. I was wondering if there might be another opportunity for me to take that up. And I think going to them with a bit of an idea, have a bit of a structure in your head as to what you'd like the outcome to be. So many homes that I go to, they have infection prevention control leads who are responsible for sort of just making sure that things are okay. Maybe they might have implemented putting up hand washing posters around the sinks. It might be that somebody knows that they can go to them and go, oh, we've run out of gloves, and your job is to go and get some more gloves. But at the same time, they're just there, just picking things up and saying, oh, hang on a second, what's that? Let's get that cleaned up. So it's just an extra sort of pair of eyes and a bit of additional responsibility when it comes to something in the home. So I think definitely don't be nervous about it. Have some confidence with yourself and know that your managers want to support you and want to get the best from you. And if they agree that that's going to be some additional training for you, then they will help that on its way. I can't imagine somebody sitting there going, no, we don't have the budget for that. I'm going to go, okay, let's take a look at the budget and let's see how we can get that to happen. And might be that we put some baby steps in between to help you develop there.
That sounds great. In terms of identifying CPD, I know that you mentioned that it's generally something that people might come across within their day-to-day job role, where they identify, for example, an infection control lead and think, oh, actually, I quite fancy doing something like that, or they've visited the hospital. How can people find out what's actually out there so that they know what direction they want their career to develop in?
It's a really good question. I think that there's a few things that I might consider within my organisation. So I might think to myself, oh, I wonder if I could see something like an organisation chart and say to my supervisor, oh, I want to be in your position in sort of 5 years. How do I get to be in your position? What's your journey about? How do I get to there? and looking at maybe, as I say, the organisation chart and identifying somebody, oh, that's a thing. But I would say also, if you're thinking about sort of development and qualifications, there are really good resources on Qual Hub, which is run by CACHE and NCFE. I think there's really good directional resources on Skills for Care, giving you an idea of sort of different things that could be done there. And I would say again, it could be that you have a chat with your manager and say, look, I want to develop, I want to do some more learning, I want to continue with my career here in this organisation. What sort of things, what sort of routes do you think are available to me, for them to give some suggestions?
That makes loads of sense. And how do you think people might identify where their skills gaps are? I know it can be quite, again, because I'm not very good at not being very good at things, it can be really difficult for me to admit that I'm struggling with something or to ask for help. Do you think that that's something that people struggle with in general? And do you have any tips for people who might want to say, actually, I'm not very good at this and I could do with some help, without fear of that affecting their work or their job role?
I absolutely do think that that is a generic issue, is people not necessarily putting their head up and going, hang on, I think I need a little bit of help with this, or equally realising that they might need a little bit of help with that. And that's where I think regular supervision meetings are really important with your line manager in the workplace. I would look to try and meet up with my manager, let's say once every 3 months, maybe more frequently if I can. Lots of the big care companies we're working with have got a formalised 3-month procedure now, which they are happening to manage through our system as well. And it's just helping them to come together with their manager and say, hang on a second, let's have a quick reflect. What training have I been doing recently? What's my work practice been happening with recently? What things have I come across in the workplace? Is there anything I need to talk out from some of the scenarios I've been coming across that could have been quite emotive for me? And then maybe we can look at my strengths and my weaknesses so that we can then look at opportunities and threats to those opportunities, and basically doing a SWOT analysis to help me progress for the next 3 months.
Great. And just for anyone who hasn't got any sort of business head, a SWOT analysis, is that when you're looking at strengths, weaknesses?
Strengths. So I used it just before. My strengths, my weaknesses, and then my opportunities and my threats. So it might be that I'm saying, actually, I'm really good at supporting Gladys to get up in the morning. My weakness is confidence with medication rounds. Opportunities, I've seen that there's a medication training coming up, so I'd quite like to go on that. Threat, I might need to be working that day and not be able to go on the training.
That's great. And I mean, is that something that you think people could do before they go into that one-to-one and sort of say, actually, I know exactly what I want to do, and this is how I'm going to position it to make sure that is received in the best way possible?
So the best one-to-one practices, they should be supporting you with helping you prepare for that meeting and saying to you, could you do something along these lines? Taking in that strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats analysis is a really, really good plan. As I say, our system can manage that for you with your manager. So they'll tell you that there's one coming up, it'll open on our system, and then you can start to record some of your thoughts and information on our system, so that then when you go to meet with your manager, it's there saved on the computer, and you don't need to worry about losing a piece of paper somewhere, and the manager can pull it up, and then you can record everything on the system there, so that it's there for you to then reflect back on as and when you want through our app.
Excellent. If people wanted to find out sort of more about CPD in general, the stuff you do online and the information that you share, where can people find you so that they can have a look at some of the stuff that you're talking about and some of the topics that are important? E-learning.
Absolutely. So e-learning for you, we're pretty active on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. So it might be that you would like to follow us, and I see equally that's the same with CACHE. And on here we'll produce things like, we'll maybe put up a little article and then maybe provoke some discussion underneath it. So it might be that we present, there was an article recently in the Daily Express on regulating the workforce, and if there needs to be more looking into what the expectations are, the minimum expectations are for somebody working in health and social care, and having a read of that article and then maybe thinking on what's my organisation doing, what are my learning opportunities, it's quite good, but it's very informal. I've read an article and then I'm having a think about something. That's some informal learning that can happen just from an interaction with an article. I'm doing that quite regularly. My organisation also subscribes to ACTAN, and they produce sort of maybe once a month, maybe once a week, it depends on what the news is, produces out some article information on, let's say, over-medicating, and gives you some information on over-medicating and what maybe the CQC are looking at with it. And reading those and taking some time to take a read of those and have a think about those things is quite important as well. It might be that you could find a live chat about a particular care topic that's of interest to you as well, online, on Twitter. They're quite often those sorts of live chats. You can take a look and find something there and just get involved. And it might be that actually you've got a YouTube channel perhaps. So our YouTube channel is /Affinity Training 1. And on there we've got a few older videos about things like the key lines of inquiry that the CQC have, and what sort of things you might be thinking about down that key line of inquiry. So it's an informal way of learning that gives you some pretty good knowledge there.
So as well as finding informal stuff and identifying the different kinds of learning that are available through services like yourself or through regulated qualifications, is there anything that you think people need to be mindful of in terms of their development? It might be, for example, that they're developing because of the things they need to do for their job, but what about things that are actually for themselves or for their own career development or sort of progression?
I think it's important to check your sources. We talk a lot about fake news, and it could be that actually an article you've come across is fake. We've seen these sorts of things. But at the same time, it could be that you are thinking of taking up a course, maybe in your own time through distance learning, in order to get a higher qualification, in order to be able to go for a higher job role. And that isn't necessarily the right qualification, or doesn't have the same robustness that your next employer might look for. So again, I would look for those trusted sources. I would use CACHE Alumni, I would use the Qual Hub, and have a little think about what course you want to take in order to progress, and what that training centre is promising or not promising, as the case may be.
That's perfect, and I do think that's something that people do worry about. Courses that you find online might not be as robust as you'd like them to be. And that's a really interesting point, possibly because of my internet activity. But over the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks, I've been presented with lots of social media adverts telling us that I can make millions of pounds if I just develop my own e-learning course. Which
I promise you can't.
Well,
otherwise,
that's really confusing.
Otherwise I'd retire.
I don't have a subject specialism. I'm not a teacher. I'm a careers advisor. I'm an employability advisor in my background. And there's not really anything that I would consider myself to be an expert in to be able to develop a course. But a lot of the stuff that these adverts sort of point me at says that I don't need to be, and that I don't actually need to know anything. I just need to know the magic marketing formula to make people buy my course. Obviously, working for an awarding organisation, I know that is not the case. But how do people make sure that an e-learning course that they're taking is something that has a sort of real world value and is real, it is the right knowledge, and it is going to give you the things that you need to have? How can they check the robustness of a course?
Yeah, it's definitely an important question to consider. So I would be asking that provider for the learning objectives for that course. What do they really believe the learning outcomes are? What content is being covered? And how might that content be presented? So could they maybe give me a sample so that I've got an idea and see if it fits with my expectations and equally my learning styles? And I might also think about looking for that training provider and what endorsement or accreditation they may have, and to see if I really, if I feel that that's a robust process. So I mentioned earlier that we have NCFE endorsement, and we can utilize CACHE endorsements as well for some of our courses that are specific to their sectors. And therefore, if you've done your NCFE qualification maybe as your diploma, you're then thinking, oh, hang on a second, I know that brand, that's a trusted brand for me. It's very difficult to get accreditation and endorsement from NCFE and CACHE, I promise. I know that I was lucky to have it earlier. I feel incredibly lucky and privileged to have it because we've worked very hard to ensure that we've gone through the robust processes to have our work checked, and that our courses are current and realistic and have good learning outcomes. I would say, obviously you could use other endorsements. So perhaps if you looked for something like the Skills for Care endorsement, they have an endorsement program as well, and they also can recommend some providers on their site too, and that might be a good shout as well.
That's great. So maybe if you're not sure what you're doing, start somewhere like the professional bodies, so someone like Skills for Care. But actually what you're saying about looking for endorsement from an awarding organisation, not necessarily NCFE or CACHE, although obviously we're brilliant, is a good way to check that something is of a certain standard.
And from personal experience, I believe that the most robust, and we have worked with different AOs, the most robust that we've come to is with NCFE and CACHE, because I know that a subject matter expert is going to look over our courses with scrutiny and then before they give approval. So it's more than just checking that my organisation is going to use a subject matter expert, which some places do. That's why I keep mentioning NCFE and CACHE being a great awarding body, I promise.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with that is that all of the quality assurers are all subject specialists, and they're going to come in and look at it through the eyes of someone in that subject specialism and actually know what they're talking about, which is quite nice.
Yeah, that's
and what about things like shadowing and sort of getting experience from maybe development opportunities? Is that something that you would advocate, people getting some experience at a level that was a little bit higher than the level they're at, or trying out jobs as development opportunities?
Most definitely. I know quite a few people, both professionally and personally, who've done similar to you. It might be that they've taken a pay cut in order to go in as a sort of junior in a team to learn, let's say, a new skill or a new specific process. Or it might be that they've gone to a company and said, look, this is where I want to work at. Can you support me with that? Can we maybe come in on a training program for that? And I think those are really key experiences as well. I think, again, worth the conversation with your manager if we're thinking of our environment and health and social care, because they might say, oh, so you're looking at, you've got a bit of interest with that team, then maybe we can place you with them for a little while and see how you're settling in, and then we can look at maybe changing a role when it becomes more appropriate for you and you're decided or set. It could be that they're doing sort of a 50-50 split. And I think that it's key to acknowledge that it's not only small employers who will do that, it's big employers as well. And those big employers might look to provide, they might have opportunities that you weren't aware of at the site down the road that you had no idea was looking for somebody of that skill set or specific role, and you want to learn and develop in that role, then you could go along there and take that role and see how that goes.
Brill. And I know that in your experience, most employers are very open to staff development and supporting with CPD and training. What about those people who are listening who maybe don't feel that their employer is particularly supportive of them taking those opportunities, or they're working in teams where there genuinely isn't the capacity to allow them to develop? In your experience, are those employers that aren't keen on staff development or don't sort of allow staff to take time or to take the initiative to develop in different directions, are they few and far between? Can people look to move and have a better experience?
Yes. Yes. They are far and few between, and I think they'll become more far and few between if people have the confidence to go and look elsewhere for another role, because eventually those employers will not be able to continue because they won't have the staff team, because they haven't received the development to be there and to remain there and to feel invested in. And it could be that potentially you maybe go and have a conversation with another home and maybe go in on something like a 0 hours contract to learn a new skill and run that alongside your previous role, so that you then feel the confidence in your new employer before making the big leap. So there are quite a few different opportunities out there, I would say, and I know that it can be really difficult, that there could have been a major change and you're suddenly looking around your setting and there are loads and loads of agency staff in, you're feeling really pressed for time, and none of this ability to think about learning is present with you. But there are definitely other opportunities out there. And it could be that actually 3 days down the line, you're going to get a new manager who walks in who also feels that way. And I would say if you do have new management come in at a time where you're feeling that you're quite pressed against it for jobs, you're really task orientated, you're trying to move from one thing to the next thing, then I would take the opportunity to meet with that new manager and say that you're looking maybe to develop somewhat and you've got some ideas that could be implemented, and see what they're thinking, because that's the nice thing of a change. If you have a change like that, to then embrace it and look for new opportunities within it.
That's great. And you talked about 0 hours contracts there, and I've never really thought about the benefits of something like that. If you're looking for a change or looking to develop, never considered it as a way to explore other opportunities and other bits of training, whilst keeping the safety, if you like, or the security of a contract with the employer, where it's sort of a little bit better the devil you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I think of my own team at the moment, I have a team member here who's working 3 days a week with us. We're seeing if it's working for them, working for us, and they're maintaining their other job outside of those hours. And it's working really well.
No, that's an absolutely great idea for anyone who is concerned about leaving a post, but actually wants to go off and do other things. That's a really good thing for people to be able to go and explore. The last thing I usually ask is if you could give us some idea as to where people can find you. I know you told us earlier on how we can find you on YouTube, but is there anywhere that people can come and follow you and stay up to date?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you come onto Twitter and search eLearning for you, that would be the best platform probably to find us. We're also on Facebook as eLearning for you, and you can follow me personally on Twitter at Elfie_Thalia.
Fab. And how do people spell Thalia?
Thalia.
That's fab. Thanks again for your time. And thanks to you at home or on the go for joining us. Don't forget, if you've got some best practice or you'd like to share with us something great, you can get in touch with us at alumni@cache.org.uk. That's alumni, ALUMNI, at CACHE, CACHE for echo.org.uk, and we'd love to speak to you. You can find us at the CACHE Alumni website at www.cachealumni.org.uk, or through the main CACHE website for information about qualifications and other CPD at www.cacheforecho.org.uk. Thanks very much, and until next time, take care.